It's that time again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to everyone's favorite biased Jumpy Cube show, where I show levels who their daddy really is, and trust me, I'm a very proud papa. Of course, as any respectable father knows, sometimes a spanking needs to be dealt at. Yeah, I think I'm done with this analogy. As I was saying, Legit Level Review is back, and this time I'm going over a level I've meant to do for about the past 5 episodes, which is Breaking Point by my boys Helpegasus and Parallax, and their friend Creeper4. I had a weird time breaking this into sections since it's a 3-person collab with weird part splits, so hopefully this doesn't feel too awkwardly paced. If it does, I blame Parallax for being so goddamn cute. You guys know the drill, let's hit it.
Hey, I woke up in the morning and I felt so bad. Yeah, I run to the bounty, yeah, I need that cash. She hopped beside my bebop and I felt so sad. I round up to the bank, yeah, I need that.
The gameplay of Breaking Point is about as disjointed as your toe after you step on one of those Legos your brother left out on the floor because his stupid ass doesn't know how to pick them up off the goddamn floor. What I mean is, it's extremely unbalanced and has some really awkward pauses and transitions. The pre-drop alone is a great example of this. You start out with a very straightforward cube and a couple basic timings, but less than 10 seconds later you're switching game modes like portals are going out of style, and the song hasn't even hit the drop yet. This section also has an issue that I feel applies to most of the level, which is the gameplay feels like it almost syncs, but the core swing and flow to the music is missing. Sure, the portal placements for the game mode changes match the phasing of the song, but whatever the fuck is happening in between them feels totally random. As I mentioned earlier, the balancing is also an issue. A great example of this is the fun and fair UFO segment, followed up by an awkward ship and cube timing combo, finished off with another UFO where half of the clicks are auto, but it's not obvious at all which ones those are until you've died to the section a few times. This might sound like nitpicking, and it absolutely would be if this was an isolated incident, but unfortunately, I have lots of worse transitions to point out later. My biggest problems with the gameplay come at the drop. I mentioned how pretty much every section is unbalanced to a degree, but the drop cranks up the difficulty enough that it's comparable to choosing to be black in a South Park game. It's the only part of the level that requires you to have a super high click speed and introduces a bit of memory. I'm not normally against either of those things, but this bit caters to an entirely different skill set than any other part of the level. It also has the single worst transition I've played in a fat minute, which is into the wave at 28%. I cannot understate how fucking janky this transition is. I actually had to grab a copy just to over practice it to gain enough consistency. The ship at the end also feels very poorly playtested. It's way too easy to tap slightly too early and completely miss the orbs that toggle the teleport portals. It also has the tightest gaps in the entire level, and while I'm all about those tight ship corridors, this is just too much. Just to further prove my point, after all this, the level decides it's going to become an easy demon because, you know, why the fuck not? The only bit that feels off are the first couple clicks in the ball, but even with that, dying once or twice will fix most of your problems. This next section looks really overwhelming at first, but then you realize you only have to click about 5 whole times throughout this entire 4x speed clusterfuck that casually ends off with a triple spike, which, by the way, let me take the time to say rest in peace Mitchie, you will be missed. It's definitely a good thing that most of this section is auto from a gameplay perspective, but the earlier drop parts had just as much stuff going on, and you had to click every damn orb and portal that dared to cross your monitor there. By now you should be getting my point that the level changes difficulty about every 10 seconds, and it's pretty damn annoying, but just in case you're not all the way there yet, this very boring break part dips to solid 8-star territory. I mean, I guess that's the point of the break part, so I can't give it too much shit. The ship at the end has a very weird click pattern, but won't kill you once you know what you're doing, so that's nice. I'm gonna combine the next 2 sections since they're pretty short and both play exactly the same. Very awkward parts that feel like they're confused on what difficulty they want to be. This is a good time to mention that if my information is correct, Breaking Point was meant to be an extreme demon, but was nerfed down to a hard demon for whatever reason as a last second decision. If the goal there was to make this more accessible, then Helpegasus and the team definitely accomplished that, but at the cost of making the gameplay feel like it was jumbled up by a blender. Most of these parts consist of orbs or very loose ship sections that will cause you no trouble, but just to remind you that you are indeed playing a demon, there are a couple clicks thrown in such as the start of the duel or the weirdly delayed first click on the ball that are there to make sure you stay near your own personal breaking point at all times. The final part of the level is definitely my favorite to play, since it relies on wave skill and basic memory. If you put at least half of your dashing skill points into the wave skill tree, or using an FPS that dips its toes into the 3-digit range, then this should be one of the most flukable levels of all time. The cube and UFO parts are a bit confusing at first, but become way less scary when you notice there aren't any timings involved, meaning the only thing you have to worry about is remembering where to tap. This is another part I basically have nothing to say about. There aren't any bugs to mention, and it's the most well-balanced part in the entire level. A really nice ending to an otherwise iffy experience. If you can't tell, my opinion of this level is, well, it's unbalanced. A lot of people seem to really enjoy this, and while it's not terrible by any means, there were enough dumb choke points to make me mildly annoyed the entire time I was playing it. So I think a 6 out of 10 for the gameplay is perfectly fair here. Right off the bat, Helpegasus comes swinging with this banger introduction to the level, for the most part at least. As with many Laser Blitz-esque levels, there's a large focus on black and white contrast mixed in with very saturated and bold main color, in this case being purple. It's a well-known fact that I fuck with the color purple hard, none of that whilst pussy shit on this channel, and this part left me very satisfied. As usual from Helpeg, his ability to layer 800 different objects and still have everything function correctly is astounding. Another common trope in these kinds of levels are these thwomp cube looking things, and I always love to see him. It's always fun for me to be playing a level and then, oh shit, there's Bob Zootin across the screen just doing his thing. I love that floaty motherfucker. Floods my brain with that good dopamine every single time. The use of moving objects and the rotate trigger is another plus. I feel like techie levels and really niche effect levels are the only things that really take full advantage of the rotate trigger, and I'm glad this level in particular did not disappoint. The problem with this part comes in around the 7-second mark, and it's called Helpegasus got really fucking lazy. Listen, I love you Helpeg, but you can't blue ball a homie like that. I guess I can give it credit for matching the emptiness of space, or the emptiness of my heart and soul after seeing this bleak abyss of a transition. Next up is Parallax's first part, and I can't help but notice how much better this would have transitioned with Helpeg's earlier design instead of what we got. The next thing I notice is that this part looks pretty damn slick in some areas, but lacks a bit in others. Parallax is another creator who's based his work off the Laser Blitz/Mannix era with relative success, but I can tell that this was made a bit earlier on in his career. The blocks are the highlight here for sure. They keep up high amounts of polish that the first part established. I love that every design is different, but almost all of them felt like they were given equal attention. I know how annoying that can be when making each block individually. Where this bit starts to lose me is in the ground spikes. They feel much messier than those in the first section and don't work with the surrounding blocks nearly as well. The mini ball in particular feels like its ground spikes were made very quickly with little attention to detail or thought on how the spikes would fit into the stuff around it. There were also a couple of noticeable instances of missing decoration, which took me out of the level a bit, but my biggest issue with this part has to be the over-reliance on glow. When working with such a slick and futuristic style, scale-hacked glow makes the part feel cloudier than a World War I trench filled with mustard gas. It's definitely not as bad as some glow mega collabs I've seen, but I wish Parallax stuck to only using it for outlines and smaller details. Helpeg's second part starts off with another space transition, but I feel like it works much better this time since it takes place just before the drop instead of being in the middle of an otherwise fantastic part. Once the drop itself arrives, the main block design and vibe of the part changes up every few seconds, so most of the stuff I say here isn't going to be very specific. I have a lot of the same praises here that I did for the first part. The movements are super satisfying, the different contrasting colors gives me something new to stare at every time I watch the part, and everything is layered super well. This definitely feels messier than the first part, but a big reason for that is the 4x speed decided to pop the fuck off here. That being said, I also have some complaints. This entire drop section feels really disjointed. What I mean by that is I feel like the level cuts and transitions awkwardly in places where it doesn't need to, with the best example of that being the mini wave. This part could have easily been a continuation of what was happening right before it, but instead we get a classic flashbang transition that leads into an extremely small wave section, then get blinded once again only to be greeted with the same deco we were staring at a second earlier. This really fucks with the flow of the decoration, and the gameplay on top of being pretty much pointless. Groups and objects could have been saved here to make the level better, which is kind of annoying. I'm also not a fan of the giant T3 chunks of ground and whatever the fuck these are. They take away your attention from the well-made background and made focusing on the level difficult for me. Maybe it's just me, but a lot of the decoration choices here directly impacted my feelings on the gameplay, which is a rare thing for me to say. This next section is split weirdly since it consists of small bits of both Helpegasus and Parallax, like a nifty little creators do. I wasn't sure how else to talk about it unless I took 5-second parts and rambled on about them for a few seconds each, which would fuck with the pacing of this video more than the explanation I'm giving now. The first half of this chunk is made by Helpegasus yet again, and it feels very similar to what came before it, although I'm beginning to notice a decline in the overall polish. Everything is still layered decently, but objects feel placed much more carelessly than before, tipping the scales between complex and messy. The colors also feel less impactful than in previous parts, with less focus on pulses and minimal hue work. To show you what I mean, I'll play this alongside the first part of the level, which feels similar in a lot of ways, but absolutely bullies this bitch in terms of execution. The transition into Parallax's section looks great though, which is good considering how different these two halves are. This might be my favorite part of the level, which is a shame since it lasts about as long as Derek Chavin will in prison, but I enjoy it tons while it's here. I've been using the word messy more than a high school janitor in this video, but for once I get to call a part genuinely clean clean. Parallax struck the perfect balance between complexity and neatness, while mixing in some amazing movements. When this style is done correctly, it feels like a futuristic machine with tons of tiny details moving around in their place, and god does this nail it. My only issue with it is how it's over in the blink of an eye. The transition out of it is also really abrupt, which completely stops the flow of the level, but it looks better than some of the previous transitions, so I won't give it too much shit. Now we arrive at the breakpoint of Breaking Point, which was yet again handled by both Helpeg and Parallax. The thing to talk about here is clearly the gorgeous custom backgrounds, which I assume are made by Helpeg. Placing the art pieces in a slope art like this gives the player lots of time to soak up all the yummy ultraviolet rays these stars are just giving away, but at least this poor cube gets to stare at some beautiful scenery as it slowly develops several malignant tumors while drifting just outside this planet's atmosphere. Poor guy. Everything else about this part is extremely average. Without the background, it would feel like something you'd randomly pick up off the featured page. I wish there were some moving objects here. Obviously you don't want to have shit moving around at the speed of light like the previous parts, but some slow drifting rocks in the foreground or some moving arrows would make this part feel much more complete. The first couple seconds actually did it perfectly, with some arrows and my homie Bob's ghetto cousin Jaquan, but I guess this dash orb is the banisher of all things fun in life, since this is the last moving object we see for the entire part. Just as I did earlier, I'm gonna talk about two tiny parts as one big section, with one being made by, you guessed it, Helpegasus himself, and the other by Creeper4, which is the scariest goddamn username I've heard since Mango Tango 38. The Helpegasus half is basically a mix of everything else he's done so far. We have some Bobs who clearly aren't obeying the speed limit. Just look at those motherfuckers. They're flying. The part is largely purple, which seems to be Helpeg's favorite color, and there's another sweet custom background to feast your eyes on. At least I'd say that if it wasn't obscured by literally every other object in existence. All my other pros and cons for this part are the exact same I've had every single other time I've brought up Helpegasus in this video, with some extra emphasis on the colors not really blending well together. But aside from that, I have nothing new to say, so I'll move on to my man Creeper4. This part feels like the inside of a computer. It also says fuck having more than one color on the screen. We're going all blue, baby, and I gotta be honest, I'm not really a fan. While I don't think Breaking Point has been great at blending its different colors together, it definitely feels weird to be tossed into a section where every design looks almost exactly the same because of the color and contrast choices. I also don't feel like there's any need for the abrupt break with the teleport portal in the middle of the section. Like any other time this is done, the immersion and flow are completely broken for no reason other than to maybe showcase Creeper's logo, and while I am all for those spooky scary creeper eyes, you can't actually see them in game at all. Just look at this shit playing in normal speed. The transition out of this part also gets completely fucked in the decoration department, a sad but common trait for this level. The final real part in Breaking Point is once again made by Helpegasus, and it's my favorite part of his since the beginning. Similarly to the last few parts, the custom background is what really holds everything together, and this has to be the best in the entire level. My only issue with it is how difficult it is to see at times. I'm assuming it's the core to a planet, or maybe just a sphere with some tendrils that would make tentacle monsters blush, but with so much shit obscuring it, it's hard to tell. Regardless of what it is, it's hella cool, and works perfectly as the centerpiece of this part. Everything built around it is pretty solid too. I love the block design in the wave section. It feels like hieroglyphics and gives the part an alien-like feel. The second half looks more like your standard laser blitz-esque affair, but it's some of the cleanest in the entire level, so I can't really complain. As usual, the movements are great, and the blue-purple color scheme works the best here out of the entire level. Some things I disliked were the batshit crazy amounts of glow rays in the wave section, and how the air deco didn't really work for me, but these are more nitpicky than most of my complaints in the other parts. There's even a completely clean transition out of the part, which is a first for this level. This is definitely up there with the earlier Parallax bit when talking about my favorite part, and it's a great way to end things off. Kinda. See, in the last few episodes, I've decided not to review the end screens of levels since they sometimes aren't a great representation of them. Take levels like Photovoltaic 2 or the Golden. Their end screens are total bops, but then the actual levels are just ugh. But in the case of Breaking Point, the end screen takes up a whole 15% of it, so I don't really have a choice when it comes to reviewing it. I'm assuming it's made by Helpegasus since he did the majority of the work on the level and didn't mention any other creators aside from Parallax and Creeper. As for the end screen itself, it's super slick and has fantastic animation, but definitely overstays its welcome. I know I'm not one to talk at all, just look at these long ass end screens, but I feel like a short still end screen would have been much more effective at making an impactful ending, especially since only 3 creators and the title need to be displayed instead of my giant ass mega collab list. It's a shame since the animations are super crisp and the attention to detail is perfect, but I just don't feel as satisfied with a drawn out end screen when compared to a quick and to the point ending. Alright, a lot of people love this level, and I can see why. For one, the Laser Blitz Manic style is one beloved by most of the community, and a cool space theme always helps to draw people in. Unfortunately, I don't think most of it was executed as well as it could have been. Parallax and Helpegasus in particular show some of their best work in certain sections, but then show surprisingly sloppy and rushed work in others. Most of the transitions in this level were awful from both gameplay and decoration perspectives, and really took me out of some damn good theming at times. That being said, I still want to highlight the super crisp movements and the art Helpegasus brought to the table. These two parts really did it for me. I just wish more of the level was this and not, well, this. Because of this, I'm giving Breaking Point's decoration a 7 out of 10. Most of you likely gave this a higher score, but after what I said above, I find a higher score difficult to justify. Combining the 6 out of 10 on the gameplay, Breaking Point comes out with a final score of 6.5 out of 10, which is disappointing to me considering I had pretty high expectations when I started playing this level. Some simple fixes such as better transitions and more polishing in some areas would have boosted this so much higher, but as it is, this is still an above average level that I'm sure most of you will be able to enjoy. As always, thanks for watching, guys. Do that thing where you hit the this and bop the that, and leave a comment so that the algorithm remembers I exist after dying for over 2 weeks. Thanks, homies. Peace.